developing a full universe of alternatives. The public and agency involved will help us do that, and then evaluating those alternatives to figure out what the best plan of attack is. I'm really proud of URS's tradition in doing public involvement. It's a hugely important aspect of this process, and getting the input from individuals like yourselves, your constituencies, and the general public, and anyone who might be using the system or reap the benefits of your transit system. We've done really well in other cities in terms of gaining input from anyone interested in providing it, and we certainly will bring that to this project. The project centers around two primary committees. Actually, there's three. These two, Citizens Advisory Committee and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, will meet regularly, but you all will be serving as our steering committee. So we'll be bringing ideas, results, and certainly having the high-level conversations with this group as we move forward through the analysis. Our public involvement plan centers around 2 rounds of open houses. One early in the process to help us define issues, understand what are some unacceptable impacts in these corridors, and help us develop alternatives. And then the second one, later on in the process, we'll be presenting our results, our evaluation results. A big part of the stakeholder and public involvement process is sort of developing the framework for the project. And that really involves 4 primary things. Developing goals and objectives is really what and when are we trying to implement and make these transit investments over the course of time. What are the issues we're trying to resolve that feed into what we call a purpose and need. Purpose and need is what are the transportation problems that need solutions, and what are our alternatives trying to, how are our alternatives trying to address those solutions. And from those 3 exercises, we'll develop evaluation criteria. So whether it be, high ridership, or we need for better travel times to get through these corridors on alternative modes of transportation, we can set up our evaluation criteria to test our alternatives to see which one performs the best and helps us reach our goals and achieve the purpose and need for each corridor. And again, we're doing this process in 3 different corridors. So those will all happen in parallel. There will probably be a lot of commonalities. I think one of our goals in the project would be to reap the economies of scale that we can, but we readily believe that there will be differences that happen within each of the corridors. So then, once we've established the framework of our project, there's really 4 stages to an alternatives analysis, and that's identifying alternatives. We want a full universe of alternatives to be considered in each of these corridors. We got a good start in the 2005 plan. Then we'll do a high-level screening to try to remove some of the ones that we know won't work. Then we'll do a detailed screening, which is getting more information about and more details about those different alternatives, and really getting down into the weeds in terms of which ones operate the best and give us the biggest bang for our buck. And then once we come up with a locally preferred alternative in each corridor, we'll refine that alternative so that it gives its best chance for competing for funds, whether it be in the federal process or even here locally. Help you make the decisions that you need to make, in terms of prioritizing them and getting them implemented. So we'll quickly go through these stages. The biggest thing about identifying alternatives is you want to identify a broad universe of alternatives so that when you get to the end of this process, we don't have some, we don't want to be at a meeting where we're laying out what the locally preferred alternative is and have somebody stand up and say, well, did you consider this alternative? Because that can really send your whole process down the toilet and you have to start over again. So we want to be able to respond to that person by saying, well, yes, we did consider that alternative, and here's the documentation from our high-level screening where we decided not to consider it any longer. So it's really important to make sure that you think outside the box in this stage. Make sure you don't leave any stone unturned, and you come up with a universe of alternatives. So in order to define those alternatives, there's really 3 primary areas of defining those alternatives. One, would be a modal analysis. In our screening, there may be some modes, and I think we've got a good start with the 2005 plan. There may be some modes that really don't need to be considered, whether it's overkill or it's underkill for the type of ridership we think would be occurring in those corridors. There's some sort of engineering challenge that can't be overcome, those types of things, whether it might be a cost issue. When you're talking about these 20-mile corridors that are really commuter-based, you're probably not going to do like a DC Metro heavy rail type of technology. So we want to try to screen some of those off that we know won't work as we're trying to define those alternatives. Then we want to essentially connect the dots. Where are the major trip generators? Where do people want to go on this system? And how do they relate to the corridors that we're looking at? So we want to essentially define some alignments that would work. And then the last piece is the condition or the existing conditions in those corridors, whether or not we've got a relatively busy freight corridor like the one that runs basically between Edmonton and Norman, or one that's been abandoned or is not used as often in the towards Midwest City. You think about it, this one doesn't look like it's really all that ready for some rail, and you can put rail back in there, but it opens up some rubber tire options. Maybe we put a busway on there, because we're not using it for rail, but at least it's preserving that corridor. So those three aspects, the mode, second one, connecting the dots, and then the conditions in the corridor will help us define those alternatives. So the second phase is doing a high-level evaluation. Some people call it a fatal flaw analysis. It's shaving off the alternatives that really have something wrong with them or really aren't meeting our goals and objectives or the purpose and need. And it could be based on any of those considerations, and then we document those results. And we determine which of those alternatives will go forward into a detailed evaluation. You want to try to bring a reasonable number of alternatives to your detailed evaluation, because you will burn up resources and time. So we really want that first screening to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us before we get into the real nuts and bolts and defined aspects of these different alternatives. And there's a laundry list of things that we're going to do. We're start developing a lot more information about what these alternatives look like in terms of what kind of travel time we can achieve with a particular technology, what the service plans might look like for operating and maintenance, what the station locations might look like, and we'll go through these. I'm not a travel demand modeling expert. I usually try to stay at a Holiday Inn Express the night before I'm going to talk about modeling. But I do use the results, and I work with modelers a lot because I'm an operations planner. Basically, ridership. How productive will this service be? Essentially, what I give the modelers are a travel time and a frequency. How often the vehicle is going to be going by. It's not really that sensitive to mode. I mean, you can make some changes versus steel wheel versus rubber tire types of technology, but generally speaking, it's only concerned about travel time and how often the bus or the train goes by. So we get those numbers. That helps me determine what type of technology we need. So if we know we've got 1,000 people an hour in a particular corridor at 30-minute service, I need probably a commuter rail train, because they're going to have 2 trips going through there, and I need the capacity to satisfy that type of ridership. Once I get those numbers, we can refine. We can actually, there's an iterative process to go back with the modelers and come up with, if we want to bump up the frequency, do we need 15-minute service during peak in order to accommodate that type of ridership? So it's a little bit of a give and take, and it helps us develop details about our different alternatives so that we can put them in the hopper and evaluate them all. The next piece is stationary locations, and or station areas, and this is also a factor in the modeling, is where your stations are and where people live and work in proximity to those stations. But we really, in a detailed evaluation, we look at station locations in looking at 2 different aspects of station locations. And the first is, how viable are they as a commuter-based type of station location. Or, typically speaking, especially when you're doing commuter rail or even a commuter bus type operation, people would be willing to drive, some distance before they access transit and then use transit to get down to their destination. And these circles, these half circles, the radius is a quarter of the distance from the downtown area. This is a map from a project we did in South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. So we want to look at the population in that service area to see who has access to that station. And you'd want to optimize the number of folks who have access, reasonable access to your facility. The second piece is delving in a little bit deeper and looking at a mile or even a half-mile radius around the station location. And this helps us in a number of different ways, but it's also determining whether or not the station is could be a destination. What kind of employment occurs in this area? It also helps us with funding. It's a possibility that this area could turn into some sort of public improvement district or some sort of tax incremental financing to help fund our system as a whole. So we can get data about that with this exercise as well. New starts criteria. This is definitely something that we want to use in our evaluation to see how eligible, how competitive our alternative would be in the federal process. The problem is this is a total crapshoot right now. Heavily dependent on what happens in the election next Tuesday. Currently, there's a notice of proposed rulemaking to change this process quite dramatically. Bottom line, the current New Starts program is really travel time based. Projects are, the cost effectiveness for projects are generated by looking at the cost versus total hours of travel time saved for transit users in the region. Okay, so it really favors longer commuter based services like what we're talking